All right. Let me start sharing and then we'll get started. Can everybody see that slide?
Yep.
Good. Awesome. Okay. So I kind of want to go through the overall plan of this week. The high level plan is to plan out like 3 or 4 weeks and then kind of get some feedback. I'm going to get some feedback from you guys after tonight. But just to make sure we take advantage of the hour or so, since we're all doing this after our real jobs. So the overall goal or target that I kind of want to head in the direction of is that minimum, if you're in a marketing capacity or something outside of software, that you're able to automate parts of your job or work with other departments to automate certain processes that will make your job easier so you don't have to do the same thing over and over again. That will kind of be like the minimum result that I would like somebody to get from going through this. The maximum result, if we get enough people to go through, would be all the way through being able to make websites, and that's dozens of weeks away. But that would be the maximum website or maximum result of going through this process. So just to touch on what we'll probably do for this first, it says 1 week, but this will probably take us 2 weeks to get through. First, I wanted to introduce, I think just David and Chase are on right now. Michael might jump in later, but David is, well, David actually knows Python and graduated from a local boot camp. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'll jump in. Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Dave. Yeah, like Jeff said, I am a recent boot camp grad. I went through Momentum Learning's boot camp in Durham, which ended up being all online due to COVID. But yeah, I know enough Python to be dangerous. I wouldn't say I'm a subject matter expert, but I've got some game.
Beautiful. Fun fact, David has applied to a position at ABC. So as he's helping you, if you could put in a good word for Anya. He reached out to me on LinkedIn to let me know that as well. So just throwing that out there. Chase, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I've been buddies with Jeff on the side outside of work for a while. Worked on a few fun projects together. I work for a company called Computer Share. I'm a developer and I build banking and legal software. I don't think I touch Python at all. Mostly a front-end guy. Spend most of my time in JavaScript, but some other languages too. That's I'm in Eastern Tennessee. Lived in SoCal before that. I've got 11 toes.
I think that's good.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Stop there.
All right, perfect. So we also have Michael, who actually runs a code school out in Southern California. I don't think he's on this particular call. He'll wait till we get in some of the harder stuff. But I will probably continue to bring subject matter experts because I'm learning Python kind of along with you guys to make sure that we're spending our time wisely, essentially. And so these are kind of some of the things we'll touch on. I won't read these off, but we will get into some coding tonight and do probably your first video game we'll probably get to at least by the end, and should be good to go from there. I think for number 7, showing you guys what scripts look like in a programming language, I think will be interesting because it's probably a term a lot of you hear all the time is various types of scripts. So various lessons that I can put together in the future as we kind of go through. Most notable or fun are kind of the last couple once we get through the basics where we can start. Python allows you to screen scrape websites, kind of take information off of websites, whether it's like stocks or sports scores or school names or whatever it is you need to do to scrape websites, and it'll do it for you. You can also automate your emails and send out bulk emails. So you could screen scrape information and then automate those emails, and all of that's going to be done by a program, so you don't have to do anything. And then another thing that's kind of cool is text messaging. So Python actually allows you to text message 100 people at the same time with various like customized information if that's something that you would be interested in doing. So as we get closer to those projects, I'll probably reach out to each person individually because as we do the projects, I would like to build something that is useful to you when we get done building it, and it's not just like a fake project. So I'll get some ideas as we get closer, but if you can kind of stick through some of the dryness of what the first couple lessons of coding are, you can get to some pretty cool stuff towards the end. So a little on my background. So I probably took this assignment a little too serious because I'm super passionate about teaching people how to code. I actually ran a code school, for those that don't know, like 2 years ago. I think I started in like 2014 or 15 out in San Diego. So each one of those little white specks is, or squares, is a student that I got a job for out in San Diego. And I would say probably at least 2/3 of those students had never learned coding at all before. So I know that pretty much everybody's capable of learning how to code. There's not a lot of math. It's not too complex, and I'm super passionate about it. So I just wanted to kind of give you some background on when it comes to Python. I'll definitely rely on subject matter experts as I bring them in, but for the process of learning how to code, I'm pretty familiar with it, and wanted to kind of use the approach that I know kind of already works as we go through this, even if it's just something that will help you be better at your job currently. So I would say the top 3 things to keep in mind are there's no right answer in coding. So all of us could do something a different way, and none of those ways are right or wrong. So it can be frustrating because you'll be like, what's the best way? And there could be 2 or 3 best ways. So just keep that in mind if you have a different solution than somebody else. Really, you're just looking for the end result of what it is that whatever problem you're trying to solve, but there's no right answer. So I just want to throw that out there before you ask the question. And problem solving and Googling are much more important than memorizing. So don't stress out as you see a bunch of information that you need to memorize any or all of it at all. Problem solving is really, Googling is probably the most important thing because you'll spend a lot of time on, you'll actually see me, I'm sure, possibly even tonight, Google some answers that I don't know the answer to because you just can't memorize all the information. Dave, I'm curious as your thoughts as you're going through the code school. Did you find that to be true also, or did you ever memorize anything?
Oh, I never memorized anything. I've got my quick reference guide here because I didn't want to get hit with anything crazy tonight. But yeah, I will reiterate though, I just dropped it in the chat. The best way to do anything is the way that works, whatever that may be.
Was it shocking how often you had to Google stuff, even people that have like 10, 20 years experience?
Even our instructor always had Google and the documentation for the language up at like all times.
100%.
So no, we used to Google stuff all the time. I mean,
awesome.
Stack Overflow was my best friend.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll get into building projects, but that's the best way to learn. So if you guys go and buy tutorials or like Udemy classes, just know that you want any resource you're using, you want to use to build projects. That's how you'll learn if you're learning, obviously outside of this. Who uses Python? So for reference sake, there are a bunch of companies, but I felt like these were the most impactful in my mind. So I won't list those, but basically everybody uses Python is probably a better way to put it. What is it used for? It's used for web development, data science, machine learning, especially machine learning. It's one of a few languages that has like the most tools to use machine learning. Startups, so when Drew Houston started Dropbox, all of Dropbox was built in Python. And anybody that uses Venmo is built in Python as well. So pretty much everything you're using on a daily basis. I got a few questions about what do I need to go through some of this stuff. I have a tool which everybody will use in a second where we can basically not have to set up a developer environment, which you may not even know what that is, but it's coming. So we probably won't have to do anything complicated, or you don't need any kind of awesome hardware until we get to like week 6 or 7 if we make it that far. So I would, you're really just going to stick with repl.it, Slack, and then any kind of computer is going to work for the first couple weeks. So by the time we get to the point where you would need hardware and we need to install stuff, that'll probably take us a whole week to do together. So we'll worry about that in the future once we know we're all committed to this. in the chat, if you want to send me your non-work email so that I can put you in an external Slack, there's I would say it looks like probably 80% of these people, the people in this particular session, are from the same employer. But just in case anybody leaves employers or wants to chat with people outside of their current employer about these specific problems and projects, that's probably the wisest thing to do. So I'll add you to the Slack channel after the call's over. Okay, so I'm not going to go too deep into this. I think it might be too confusing to start out with, but I kind of want to explain, like, where does Python fit into websites overall from a high level. So Facebook's kind of the easiest example that I could use. Front end, when people refer to front ends in development, they really just mean the part of the website that you can see, essentially. So that's just going to be like your Facebook timeline, all the things that you can essentially see. When you get to the back end, that's where we're going to use Python. So in a little bit, there's going to be a little black text box where all of our calculations are going to come out. That's really where the back end functionality is going to happen. So that's where Facebook kind of tracks you. They listen to your conversations, they customize your timeline. That's where all of that data processing stuff is happening, essentially. And then the database is kind of where they remember your username, your password, who you're following, all that kind of stuff. So I know, Emma, you asked beforehand, like what are I think you asked, what did you ask? What are alternatives to Python?
Like what the difference is between, like, why you choose Python over another one, basically.
Okay, so the reason you'd use Python is those specific use cases before, where in machine learning there's just advantages because there's more tools to use in Python, and then also in web development it scales better than some other languages, which basically just means that if you use other languages and you have a million users, it might be slower, whereas Python does a pretty good job of, no matter how many people you have using your software, it'll still be fairly quick. And then just in case you're around development people or somebody references this in the future, is why I put the alternatives. So sometimes instead of having a website where you can see the data be visualized, somebody will use Tableau. And so the same flow will happen. It's only that it'll just go from the back end straight to Tableau, and it'll kind of skip that front end piece. And in the same way, you'll hear people talk about Java, PHP, Ruby, C#, Node. Those are all, for sake of argument, kind of the same thing as Python in terms of what they do, but the differences between each of those is kind of outside the scope of this class and outside my scope of knowledge to strongly argue what the differences are. But we'll just be focusing on Python. And then SQL is when you hear people talk about SQL, that's going to be straight from a language that you have to use to talk to the database. So if I want to get a list of these users over on the far right, I would have to use SQL to extract that information from the database before I could get it to use Python. So essentially you have to use 2 or 3 of these things if you're just doing each on your own. Or some larger companies will have front-end teams, back-end teams, or database administrators to do like each separate section. It just kind of depends on how big the company is as to how that's structured. So with that, I want to ask if anybody, do we have any questions so far? Okay, I think we're good. If you have questions, I have the chat up most of the time now, so feel free to do it that way. Okay, so what I need everybody to do is go to this site here. And then when you get to that site, you'll just want to press start coding. You can create an account later if you want to, but it's not necessary. Then on this dropdown, you want to create a repl.it in Python. And then what's the best way to make sure everybody Is everybody good? What's the best way to? All right, perfect. If you are behind a step or two, just let me know in the chat. It's probably the best way. Otherwise, I'll probably keep going. But don't feel bad. If you are behind us, you're going to get more and more behind us if you're stuck. So please jump in if you your computer freezes or you need us to stop for any second. So all right. Oh, wait. To everyone. Sorry, I forgot to post that to everybody. All right, I think everybody's good. So what you'll do, this is going to be your first, it's everybody's first computer program. You should take a picture when you're done. So if you type in print hello world, and you have to have the brackets, and you always have to have these parentheses, is that what they're called? Around the, around what you want it to say, and then hit run. And then hello world is always kind of everybody's first program they write. And then let's do some of this. So in general, this will be the file within that you'll be writing all of the code in. And this will essentially be what we get into in a little bit, will be like the script. And then over here is what's called the shell. So the black text screen that I was talking about before, that all the calculations are done, they'll be done over here. So all of our output will be over here, and you'll want to put all the input over here. So if you want to do math calculations as well, you can basically get it to print whatever you want, and it'll do basic math for you so far over in the print world section. So with that, can everybody copy and paste in that? So it should be repl.it /languages /Python_turtle.
Were you saying to put questions in the chat, Jeff, or do you want us to speak up?
Speaking up's probably easier since
Cool.
nobody's since you're probably not going to talk over anybody.
Okay. I put that in. It didn't do much for me. Let me check.
Maybe try that one. Is that link clickable or no?
Is it working for everyone else, or is it just me?
It worked fine for me.
Yeah, it's working for me.
Yeah,
What?
working here.
I don't have any issues.
Awesome. Okay, so Chase, you good? Or what's your screen say?
This brings up a blank. Are we supposed to be seeing what you just wrote, or is it just supposed
Nope.
to? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I see a blank main.py open for editing.
Okay, so I'm gonna put these two lines in here that you guys will start with. And then just the first two lines is probably fine. And then I'm just gonna show you how this is set up and then go through a couple concepts. Okay, so um, the this particular library in Python is called Turtle. You'll probably never use it again, but I kind of wanted to show it because it's visual and it's more of a thing moving around on your screen, which is just kind of easier to grasp some of the basic concepts to start out with. So essentially, what it's going to do is this little arrow guy is essentially the turtle, and he's going to do whatever you tell him to do. So he's going to start by going forward and then left and then forward by 90. And so we can essentially make him do whatever we want. Or all right, so what I want to touch on at first is the turtle is kind of in programming. It's called the object, and I don't get too worried or concerned about these terms yet because they're not that important. The biggest thing is that when you want an object to do something, you have to tell it what to do. So in this case, we're going to tell it to move forward, and then how far to move forward, and then we're going to tell it to turn left, and then how far to turn left, and then same thing to get it to essentially derive this pattern. So what I want everybody to do is you'll start with this, and this is at least the first portion of the correct answer, is I want you to make the turtle complete an entire square. And I'll give you probably 3 or 4 minutes to attempt it or get as far as you can get on it. And then if you could just say in the chat when you're done, I'll set a timer for 4 minutes. And then we'll review the answer just to kind of go through that. So you can, just to be clear, you can go forward, you can go left. What else can you do? That'll probably be all you need for this one. You can go, I don't think you can go back. You guys aren't going to need that long. Yeah, the direction will be the forward will make it move, and then the left is going to make the turtle turn before he moves.
You can go back, by the way.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have are you looking at are you looking at the documentation?
No, I just played with it until it worked.
Nice.
I do that a lot too.
That is a good practice.
Mind if I ask a technical question? If we don't have an answer, that's fine. But on line 1, we import turtle, this class turtle. And on line 3, we say turtle equals turtle. I'm assuming that we're overwriting the class or the prototype that's imported on line 1, on line 3, so that if we wanted to create another instance of the turtle object, we couldn't.
You can create another turtle object if you wanted. You'd have to call it like, you could say like on line 4, turtle2 equals turtle dot turtle as well, and it would be a replicate of it. Kind of like if you wanted to say like x equals 2 and y equals 2, you can do that, and then you can call them separately as x and y. They both equal 2. You can do that same concept, if that makes sense.
So if I were doing this in JavaScript, on line 3 I would call it turtle1, and then on line 4 I would call it turtle2. You're saying on line 3 that we're declaring this instance of turtle, and it's not overriding the turtle object from line 1?
No, you're actually importing the turtle function, for lack of a better term, where you're calling turtle.turtle. You're attaching that to the name turtle. You could, in theory, on line 3, instead of saying turtle equals turtle.turtle, you could say like x equals turtle.turtle. And then on line 7, instead of saying turtle.forward, you could say x.forward.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. So I won't pick on anybody to go through the answers, but any way that you arrived at making a square, you can. Did anybody have any different of an answer? I'm curious. Nope. Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead.
I did have the same exact answer, just because I don't know how to do it any other way. But I was just wondering if there is a way to make the forward and left run multiple times, like those 2 lines, until it completes the square. And we're thinking running it out.
That's a good question. So we will get into how to make things repeat shortly. But essentially those will be called loops, where you want something to do something until it's complete. So loops are one of the fundamentals of programming, because one of the first rules of programming is to not repeat yourself. And so that will essentially transition into the first thing I want to do is talk about. So that was a good question. We will essentially need to use those loops so that we don't have to continually, like if we needed to draw a small square and then a bigger square and like 300 squares, we wouldn't want to sit here and copy and paste this 300 times. So we would use a loop essentially to accomplish what you're talking about. So the first thing that I want to talk about is variables. And so if you put I always call it a hashtag, even though I'm sure that's not its actual name. But if you put a hashtag before anything in the editor, it will comment out your code so the computer does not know that it's there. So we're going to cover variables in here, and then we're going to cover, what should we cover? Comments, and let's do functions. So the first thing we'll do is variables. So this turtle right here is a variable, so you could actually call this Jeff, and if you did, oh, of course it works. How does that work?
So if you change it from on line 5 and 6, make that Jeff.forward.
Yeah. How does it work?
That. Don't do all of them, just do like half of them and then run it, and you'll end up with 2 different turtles.
Ah, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna kill that example because I was wrong, but I appreciate that, Dave. That was helpful. The here's a better example. So let's say in a program you need a credit card number or your social security number. That's one too many. So when instead of having to remember what your credit card number is every single time in the program that you're going to be using that number, you're going to be using this variable to represent what this what exists here essentially. So so actually let's do an exercise. Keep that tab open because we're going to come back to the turtles. Open a new repl.it in just regular Python, but it won't be the turtle library. And so the example I have for these variables is let's say I wanted to use as close to example as possible. So let's say we have a startup company, and what we do is we do analytics for how much that they spend on paper. And so we have 2 customers and we get their information. So we have a company called, oh, let's do it like this. We have Dunder Mifflin employees, and that equals, they have 20 employees. So this is just an example of a variable. So in the future, we're going to use that, this variable instead of having to use the number 20 each time, and to kind of remember for reference sake why that's helpful. And then let's say each year they spend $1 million on paper. And then let's say we have another company. This is from Mad Men, for those that have seen that show. This is the name of their marketing agency. So let's say they also have 20 employees. And let's copy that instead of, to answer your question, Emma, yeah, in Java, you actually have to say that it's an integer. So you have to go like this. But in Python, you can actually just write it out, which is super nice to not have to write that out every time. Or my personal opinion is that it's super nice. And then, so to that point, I think in Ruby, it's DEF. Oh no, that's for functions. We'll get to those in a minute. Some of them, I think in JavaScript, it's VAR for variable, or const if Chase is listening. All right, so we have 2 companies, each with 20 employees, and this is their annual paper costs. So what we want to do is figure out the cost of paper per employee. So this we'll use for Dunder Mifflin, and this one we'll use for, let's just say SC. All right. So we are just going to, so what you can actually do in these variables now is take the paper cost and divide it by the employees. And so we'll do the same thing with the marketing agency. Okay, hang on. I think somebody has a question. So I'm going to stop right there to see if anybody has any questions. So far, all we've done is created 4 variables, or 6 variables actually in this case. And these variables actually have calculations inside of them and that they're holding for us for the time being. Oh, sweet. Dave's answering questions. Perfect. Looks like everybody's good at the moment. So feel free to interrupt me as well, because if you have a question, I'm sure somebody else is thinking the same thing or lost about the same thing. So, all right. So let's just pause right there for a minute. And one thing you want to kind of do as you're writing these, what we're actually creating right now is a script, essentially. So what you kind of want to do in your scripts as you're writing them is just check to make sure that nothing seems weird before you continue to add additional code to your script. So let's just go ahead and check in and see if the numbers, if we're getting an error or if it's actually going to give us a number back. All right, so in these two on lines 11 and 12, we're basically doing exactly what we did with Hello World. We're just printing it, and then something's going to, either an error is going to show up either over here or a number is going to show up over here. And so We should get, what we're expecting is 2 numbers. That's what we hope to expect over here. And so let's run those. All right, this is a weird Python trick, but I think if you do these double things, if I remember right, it'll give us whole numbers. All right, so currently, Dunder Mifflin is spending $50,000 on paper per employee, and Sterling Cooper is paying $300,000 per employee. So what we want to do with that, and so typically you'll kind of want to, I wrote this beforehand so I don't have to type it all out. What you kind of want to do is write out messages for yourself, so when you get those numbers back, you kind of have some, it's really only so that it's more readable for you. All right. Next. So again, I'm gonna, well, I'm gonna comment this out real quick, but we'll come back to it. All right, let's run it again. Okay. So the reason that you want to have variables is if Dunder Mifflin is your customer and they end up hiring 5 more people next month and they're like, hey, we added 5 more employees, you don't want to have to go down and change all of these calculations manually, because if you change this 20, then this is going to be affected here, which will cost change here, which will change here. You just want to go to one spot. So they're like, hey, we added 5 more people. So all you have to do is be like, how many employees do you have? You have 25. Okay, so now it's 40,000 per employee. Also, our cost went up to 1.5 million. And then you can just run it again. So the inputs to this script are just going to be how many employees they have and how much paper it costs at your 2 customers. So then you can tell them, all they have to do is give you this information, and then it'll output what it is that they're looking for. So let's say you want to compare these 2 companies, and you don't want to compare them visually. You want the program to just tell you which one's more, or who's doing a good job or not doing a good job. So we'll get into if statements probably next week, but we want to do this. I forgot. Python cares a lot about white space and where you put things. So you kind of have to indent, is what I've learned. Why am I red? Oh, because all right, so this little red line will tell you that you're doing something wrong. So if I try to run it, I'll get an error, which is what this is. So typically,
Yeah, you can take the parentheses out of it on line 17, and it should fix that.
the parentheses.
Yeah, so just do if space.
Oh, I actually think it's the variable name also, because I copied and pasted this in. So, so when it says name, cost of paper per employee, and then when I had done this earlier and copied and pasted it into my program, I actually used all the initials for the law firm, but I just used SC this time. So, oops. And then I must have done something different on this one too. Oh yeah. So this is gonna be aggravating. I mean, this is nice that Python does this for us. It does this in Java also. But if you have something that's like, this entire program will not run and will not give you the answer, all because this is a capital M and not a small m. So no matter how many years of programming experience you have, it's more than likely going to be like a comma or a semicolon that you spend 2 hours hunting down because you can't find it. But just know that if that happens to you, it's completely normal. Frustrating. Frustrating, but normal. So yeah.
Hey, Chase, you have a question?
Do you have
Sorry, Chase, did you have a question?
I was just saying every day. I do that every day. Type it.
Yeah.
So I don't really like this saying, but it kind of stuck in my head, where the error message is your friend. So the error message will almost always at least point you in the right direction. So when it says cost of paper per employee DM is not defined, that just basically means, hey, we looked for this and you didn't talk about this anywhere in your program, so we don't know what this is. So please make please make this so that we can run appropriately. So let's go ahead and run this. All right. So this will analyze the two companies, compare the two, and if Michael Scott at Dunder Mifflin is doing a better job than the other one, than the other company, then it will say give him a raise, versus if we probably just add another 0. So now it's 600 per employee and 300 per employee, and now it'll tell us essentially what the outcome of the inputs became. So so the biggest thing to take away from this particular one, we'll get into if-else statements, so don't get too hung up on those if that's weird to you. The biggest thing is just making sure that these variables, that you're setting as many variables as you can, so that if you ever need to make changes to the way the actual calculations are working, you can do as little work as possible, essentially. So Chase or Dave, do you have anything to add to this particular exercise before I go back to the turtles?
Question. I got questions. Real quick. Are we going to use curly braces or brackets at all, or is it all indent based?
It's indent based. You're thinking from like JavaScript type
Sure.
for running? Yeah, no, it's all indent based. It's colons and then down a line indent over.
Industry standard is 2 spaces per tab indent or 4 for Python?
Now we're getting into spaces versus tabs. I personally prefer tabs. I always do tabs. I believe industry standard on that is 4 spaces.
Cool.
So once we get into Slack makes it I'll throw this all in the Slack channel we're going to be in, just to keep it so that you guys can actually mess with it, and because that's kind of how you'll learn how some of this stuff works, is changing some of these things around. So I'll Slack this to you once I add you a little later, so that we don't lose this and you can mess with it if you'd like to. So going back to our buddy the turtle. So we've covered variables, and then we're going to cover functions, and then we should be good for week 1 on basic functionality. So functions are, I always like to think of functions as like machines in a factory that you dump you dump steel into, you dump rubber into, you dump like actual raw materials into, and then it shoots you out a finished bicycle, essentially. And so that's kind of what a function is. It makes it so that you can type a bunch of code and tell the machine essentially what to do, and then it's just going to shoot out and do exactly what you told it to do and give you the response that you needed. So so let's just start with the turtle and go through that. So earlier we walked through how to actually tell the turtle to go into a square. Can I just, nice. Okay. So what we're going to do is if the way you write a function in Python is you hit DEF, which stands for define, square, and then brackets or whatever. They have to be what's the word for these? Parentheses? Is that right?
Yeah,
Yes.
parentheses.
Okay. I always get like my curly cues and my brackets and all that stuff confused. So parentheses, and then you have to put this colon, and then to Dave's point, you have to indent these, and they have to all be kind of aligned together, essentially. So when I run this, it shouldn't work. And the reason that it would not work is because essentially all we've done at this point is set up the machine, going back to the factory analogy. So once we put something in, once we tell the machine to run, then this is what the machine will do for us. But we haven't told the machine to run. And so the way that you get a machine to run is things like that. Oh, we probably don't need the colon. So the way you get the machine to run is the technical term for it is you call it, essentially. So you can think of your phone sitting there, and as soon as somebody dials your number, they're calling you, and you have to do the same thing with a function. Like you have to call the machine and tell the machine to go ahead and run. And so that's just how functions work. So a lot of times you'll write a bunch of functions and then you'll test it, but you'll forget to call it. So just make sure as a reminder in the future that you are going to call it. Once you call the function, it will go ahead and run for you. So then what you can do, so now at this point, if we want to, so can we do that, Dave? Will that work? If we do 2 and we just use the functions?
I'm not entirely certain.
Oh, actually, I got a better idea. All right, so let's do. All right. All right, so now we're going to call the function. We're going to tell it to move forward, and then we're going to tell it to make another square. So instead of having to copy and paste this twice, we can just go ahead and use the square. Will that make it 2 squares next to each other?
No, you just do square, square, because you're ending at the bottom left corner.
Ah. Nice. Okay, so let's say, for example, thank you, by the way. If we had to make a chessboard, we could now use this square functionality, and then we would actually probably make another function called row that would make a row, and then have it move over one, and then make another row until we essentially had a chessboard in the computer program, essentially. So, those are kind of the overall. Those are kind of what you're using functions for. The I'm trying to think. All right. All right, we have two more things I think we can squeeze in the next 5 minutes, and then we should be good for week 1. So when it comes to math in Python, we already talked about if you use divide, it'll end with 1. It'll give you 1 decimal point. If you use 2, it'll give you a whole number. You can also multiply, add, subtract, and then there is the percentage sign, which means modulo. And so what modulo is going to do is give you the remainder on a math function. So when you would use that, or when I use that the most often, is when I need something to happen. I usually use it around dates. Come on, coming out. So let's say you create a variable called day of the week, and you want to take whatever the, how am I going to do this? So, okay. So you take the day of the month, which in this case would be we're going to say that it's 8. And then no matter what, so the day of the month would always go in here. Or date of the month. And then you're going to divide that by 7. And so then if the remainder is 1, I'd have to map this out, and I can come up with a better example next time. I think 1 is usually Sunday. So if the go ahead.
Are you looking for a simple example of when modulo is useful?
Yeah, do you have one?
Odds and evens. So any even number modulo 2 is going to give you 0. Any odd number modulo 2 is going to give you 1 because it always gives you the remainder. So like 9 divided by 2 is always going to give you, 9 divided by 2 is 4.3 or 4.1 or 4 with a remainder of 1. So you get the remainder of 1. Sorry, quick math in my head is.
All right. This is not how you write this.
See if I can write it up real quick.
But if here, I'll let you work on that because I have one more variable thing I want to do. So what you can put, another use for variables in this case is, let's say how far the turtle runs equals 90. Oops, we don't want that. All right. So in what you can do is, instead of typing 90 in each one, you can, same thing, tell him how far he's going to run in each one. And then you can, down here, you could do square. Ooh, we can't.
Hey, Jeff, I just dropped that in the chat. You should be able to copy and paste that in.
Perfect. So another use of variables is if you want to tell them different destination distances to be traveling in each of these scenarios, you can just change it there. And then so if we want to make it bigger, make the squares bigger, all we have to do is change it in that one variable. What? Man, I made it an hour without a demo breaking till just now.
Because you're turning 180 degrees when you do your lefts.
Oh, so we need to just do, all right. So how far he runs, we can only do in the forwards. That's a good catch. Okay. All right, cool. All right, let's go to, I got all kinds of odds and evens. Whoa. Look how fancy.
Those spaces didn't work right.
All right, hang on. I'm going to use an easier one so we don't confuse on syntax.
Yeah, the same thing.
All right, so let's comment out turtle. All right. So in this scenario, all we have to do is put in whatever number we want, and it'll tell us essentially if it's odd or even. So that's an instance where we would use modulo. So I appreciate you guys sending that to me. Oh, sweet. All right. Looks like the people who had errors solved it and the indentation issue. So, okay. So we've covered variables. I think one thing I kind of want to talk through a little more in depth next time is passing in these parameters and these arguments, because I think I confused myself as we are going through it. So I'm sure you guys are confused as well. So we'll probably start there next time. And then I think we can actually get into lists and dictionaries, or at least the beginner parts of those. So you can start to see how, if you have a list of paper companies similar to this, how we can store all of these in if we have 10 of these companies, how we can store them, both the amount of employees and then also the amount of revenue that they have or cost that they have, in a way that's super easy to pull from and manipulate and make better scripts. So yeah, the one thing I didn't touch on only briefly was that all of these, this is, I think I mentioned it once actually, this is essentially the script. This is the shell. So if we were to copy and paste every single line from here into here, it would actually give us the same result. So you can do that if you want and go through and set all of these variables. And if I were to copy and paste every single line, it would essentially shoot out this. But by putting it into a script, it kind of gives us the ability to write it freely and then just check in when we need to check in on what the actual results are and make sure we're kind of in the right ballpark, essentially. So does anybody have any questions before we stop at this? If you can, again, I got probably half of you guys, but if you can send me your email privately in the chat right now, at a minimum, I want to send you a survey to kind of see if I'm going too fast or too slow, and kind of help, because I want to make sure we're kind of all going at the same speed, because we can kind of go through this. There's no real rush for anybody to go through this. So I would rather be thorough with everybody than to rush through this and have you guys be super confused like 2 or 3 weeks from now. So shoot me your email and I will send you that survey, because I would appreciate how we can all use our time the best, since we're all working after hours. So, okay. Does anybody have any follow-up questions that are related to any of the code we wrote or any of the topics that we covered?
I do just want to put out, has anybody used JavaScript in the past?
Very
Okay,
small.
so just as a reference, the shell, the black piece on the right-hand side of the screen, is very much like using a console in a browser, where you can go individually line by line and put your code in there to test it out.
Yeah, you could even right click and open up in Chrome and go to inspect, and then it'll open up the console. You'll see the same exact thing behind the scenes.
Yeah, but that
So-
console's running JavaScript. So
How do we run this? Where's my run button? Oh, there we go. All right. So here's what he's talking about. If we were writing this in JavaScript, it would be console log instead of print. And if we go to, let's go to CNBC.
Oh, I think I mixed up JavaScript and Java. Java's println, right?
I don't know about the specifics on Java, but yeah, they are 2 different languages.
Okay.
I think Java's just print.
Java might be print. I use Java every day, but I use log.info, which helps me with the backend with that specific tool but I think Java overall is also print to your guys'
Okay.
point. It kind of depends on the tool, but you just need to know what that phrase is for you to check in essentially. So this is kind of so this would be front end. All these texts are just, my favorite thing to do always is like so you can inspect and kind of look at the HTML. We'll get into HTML and all that stuff as we move on, but I always like, you can actually manipulate this stuff on the websites itself if you want. And then as you go into the JavaScript stuff, well, I'm not going to go into the JavaScript stuff because Chase is too good at it for me to do it live with everybody else. So, so yeah, to your point, if you are writing a program in JavaScript and you do console log, to David's point, this is where it'll show up. It'll show up right here once you run your program. And you'll use console log all the time just to make sure that your program's actually running and to make sure your variable is actually a number instead of a word when you're making sure when you need to do a calculation. It doesn't say the number for, it doesn't say the word for, it says the number for, so you'll use it all the time. Once you
can also in the console right here, just how you have it up. What I was referencing is this is effectively your shell right here. You can run your commands individually in your console. And so anybody that's used JavaScript in the past that's familiar with this concept, it's the same on repl.it. That's kind of your shell is kind of the point I was going for.
Okay. And then just X times Y. So you can actually do the calculations here in your browser itself. And if you walk past a programmers at your particular job's office, I can almost guarantee you this is what their screen probably looks like. They probably have this open because they're trying to check to see if what they're working on is actually working or not. So awesome. All right, well, I'll respect everybody's time. And at the emails you sent me, I'm also going to send you a link to I'm going to put all of these up on YouTube in case you have to miss one in the future. But if you want to reference something that we did this evening, I will also put this up on YouTube. And it usually takes a few hours for it to get on YouTube. So I'll probably send those out tomorrow, but you'll get a link if you want to reference anything that we talked about tonight or watch again. So I think that's all I got. Everybody good?
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeff. This was great. It was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for
I
having me.
will talk to you guys next week.
Thanks,
Later.
Jeff.
Thank you.
so much.
Yep.
Jeff.